Deception. One of the aspects of Amphoreus that has left us on the edge of our seats throughout this story and the theme of patch 3.6. We have seen a lot on our journey through this cursed and treacherous land, but we have not experienced anything quite like this. Lygus lies, Cypher lies, Evernight lies, and memories don't even tell the truth anymore because they get erased, stolen, returned, and even fabricated, all while the point of view is shifting every few minutes, changing everything we knew about this world. But there is one thing that always stays true, and that is the fact that I will be right and wrong in my predictions simultaneously every single patch. So to say the least, the story was complicated. Danheng has become Zhongli, March has become Sela, Cyrene is Elysia, and that is just the most basic of information. With the shocking part being Evernight soloing the verse on her debut. Yes, so many things happened, and if you got lost at any point, you've come to the right place. Because this is the truth and lies of Evernight explained. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is the same as always. I will be retelling the story, but I will be placing events in chronological order and not jumping around nearly as much, because the way Hoyo does things is very confusing. Good? Good. Alright. So our story does not begin with the Trailblazer, it begins with March 7th being memo-snatched and dragged into what I like to call the Aeon Observatory, where the Aeons look at us. Because this all happens before Danheng and the Trailblazer got to Amphoreus, and this Cyrene is the original Cyrene who hides herself in time after claiming to have erased herself. Because she didn't, and nor did she disappear when she merged with Mem. We're starting off hot here with the lies. But we know what happened here. Cyrene warns her about the memo keepers and tells her to leave, and March, under the impression that Danheng and the Trailblazer went ahead of her into Amphoreus, entered herself. But this wasn't the case. For two reasons. One, that this was a death trap from the beginning and the memo snatchers were wearing the likeness of their victims to trick her. And two, well, due to time dilation, she entered Amphoreus at least 97 days before we crash landed. But this was a good thing. Let me explain. You see, she entered here at the entrance of the Demiurge room thing, and she ended up triggering the defense protocol, and after it tweaked out and welcomed the Trailblazer for some unknown reason, promptly teleported her into the then current Amphoreus cycle. But unique to how we got there, she was a mimetic entity and no one could interact with her, let alone see her. But one person. The one person she knew was bad news. The caveman himself. So she ran from him for the full 97 days until she was cornered with no options remaining. And this is where Evernight shows up and offers her aid on seemingly grievous terms, to which March, again with no other option, reluctantly agrees to. And in an instant, the Evernight we know has manifested for the first time. And she wasted no time, because right upon her awakening, she hid her presence from Lygus, flooded the entirety of Amphoreus with memoria, and hijacked data into becoming her memo sprites. So she now has imperceptible eyes and ears in every corner of the world, and let me tell you, she is everything I said a person with a true mastery of remembrance power would be in Amphoreus, a place created out of memories and memoria. Oh yeah, she was in control at that point, and she made it our problem, and laid low until it was the proper time to make her move. And little did we know, it was here. Because we thought this was the core flame of world bearing that Cyrene sent for us. But just as a Trailblazer was going to place the core flame into the vortex, they remembered something. There was no time demigod this cycle, and here is where Evernight made her move and confirmed that this was in fact the case. And she herself was lighting up the core flame with some sort of illusion this entire time. Why? Well, simply put, she's got her own plans for how this world should be, and this plan is that this world shouldn't be. And that everything and everyone should just be erased, with the only exception being us and Danheng, because March cares about us. But this wouldn't be an Evernight interaction if she didn't lie, because after asking her where March was, she replies that March is no more, and her actions were on account of March's dying wish, something we know for a fact that March would never want. And with that, She makes us sink into the Sea of Oblivion and become her guest in this farcical dream. And here is where we should have confirmed that she was ENIGMATA, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here, that's not confirmed yet, so let's continue. Because after wandering around this really creepy dream, we get saved by Cyrene, who helps us retreat into our memories. Which memory? Well, the most suppressed one, of course. The memory of the very beginning of the game, revealing what Kafka said to us too in real life years ago. But that deserves its own video, so I'll move on, because when we are done listening, Cyrene has been detained by Evernight's army of memo sprites and has left us to wander the halls of our own minds until we get cornered ourselves, and Sunday cuts in, assisted by Herta combining the erudition and harmony's powers once again, attempting to save us from this dream that we are still in, only for Evernight to show up herself and absolutely embarrass him to the point of where Herta had to save him before he got stuck too. And just like that, we are pulled even further into Oblivion. However, this was only phase 1. Sunday was a rescue attempt, but also a diversion, and on the back end, this was phase 2. Black Swan had infiltrated the Aeon Observatory to see that Evernight had already soloed the entirety of the Memo Snatcher's forces. And I didn't even think this was possible, but she somehow pulled the consciousness out of a Memo Keeper's body. Okay, I need for you to understand what this means. Memetic entities of the Remembrance cast away their physical bodies to become memories. They have no real form and just take the form that they choose to take. So when we see that Evernight has rendered this vessel empty, she took a soul out of a soul. Do you know how insane that is? To disembowel and lobotomize a spirit? All the last one could do was keep repeating what Evernight had said, and Black Swan tried to keep her cool, but she was shook. I know she was getting Acheron flashbacks by this point because she wasn't even sure if she was gonna survive. Why? Because Evernight was right behind her. And here is where we'll have to swap to Danheng's side of the story, and this part begins in the exomyth where Herta realizes that it is pointless to argue with a caveman. And to break this impasse, Anaxa makes his grand entrance like the great performer he is, and reveals that Zandar's empty head had room for two. Because he was in there with Cyrene, but much worse. Because now he finds himself in the same place Cersei's was in, and Zandar wasn't even mad about it. One, because he was genuinely impressed by his favorite Chrysos heir that he modeled off of himself, because he also waited in the data stream for his time to shine for the same amount of time that Hycelin's waited for us to return. Meaning that he has also inherited Zandar's stubborn patience. And while this grand reveal was happening, Cyrene slipped out because this was the same moment that we were being enigmata'd by Evernight. And with that prelude out of the way, we catch up with Danheng, who was released by Evernight back to the Express, but on his way back he was assaulted by Memo Snatchers, and he kinda just took them out. That was no big deal. But what was a big deal was that he finally got to talk with the Express crew thanks to Herta completing the Spirit Warp Jump and capturing many more Memo Snatchers. And it is through this that we learn some crumbs about the sinister plot of the Memo Snatchers. Turns out that they knew about the Destruction's influence over Amphoreus from a very early stage, and like I predicted, covered it up. Why? Because they wanted to wait until Irontomb succeeded and Noose died so that they could claim the memories of a dead Aeon. But there's more to this, and we learn more about this later, so let's continue with Danheng. Because he wasn't too happy about his two little siblings trapped in Amphoreus without their big brother to watch over them, so he requests to be sent back to Amphoreus to look for us. And under Screwlim's guidance, he is sent back with a guide in tow. And this is why that little prelude was needed, because this guide is none other than the first genius and serial glazer, Zandar, one Kuwabara, who is just as happy to see Danheng as Danheng is to see him. And Zandar is just as smug as ever because he refused to fight alongside Danheng in very Zandar fashion. He lavishly complimented his fighting prowess. He really can't stop with the glaze, can he? He glazed Herta and Saridra, even though Saridra hated it, glazed Anaxa, and now Danheng, and he won't stop calling us esteemed guest. Anyway, moving on. Zandar's got issues. But he also ends up guiding us to something I predicted a long time ago. Not only does he confirm with 100% certainty that KHASLANA did escape Amphoreus to fight with Nanook, and did in fact draw blood from the Aeon, but that blood melded into KHASLANA's body, and this kept him alive. I told you, I told all of you that KHASLANA wasn't dead, and that Nanook was saving him for when he needed to replace a Lord Ravager. And this only adds more evidence pointing towards the Lord Ravager KHASLANA, enemy of the destruction, rising from the grave reborn by Nanook. But my theories aside, KHASLANA's angry side shows up, but his good side then follows, and when they combine, he shows us that he hasn't changed a bit, and then blows open a hole straight into the corner that Evernight is hiding in. But getting there was a trek in itself. So continuing with the Danheng side of things, he was intercepted in his path by a mountain dweller that called himself Terravox. And he really wanted to get his hands on permanence power because Evernight showed him something about it and he lost his mind. But this isn't even the strangest thing that happened because Danfeng shows up. And I hope you're ready for a Danheng lore nuke because that is what we got next. Because after meeting the 3 Tribios and awakening our favorite fish, he had some personal problems that he had to come to grips with, which really made him understand Danfeng more. Because just like Danheng, Danfeng was stoic about it, but he cared deeply for his companions. Like, he would die 1,000 times for any of his friends easily. So when Baiheng died in battle, he couldn't handle it. And just like how Danheng is now, Danfeng risked everything for a chance to revive her. And even though he didn't succeed, he had peace with the fact that he would do it again. Because that glimmer of hope was more than enough for him to do everything in his power to bring Baiheng back. And if you want to know about this edition of Imbiber Lunae, this video is the one for you. But yes, Danheng is just Danfeng with a happier life where his risks actually work out. Because Danheng really had no plan here, he was just looking for the Trailblazer recklessly and hoping for the best. And he was willing to kill any and everything in his path to get there. Because just like Danfeng, Danheng was willing to give everything for his companions. And with that, we say goodbye to the past and trauma-free Yingxing and Jinglil. I sincerely wish that they could stay with us. Can we get a skin of Happy Jinglil, please? I want to play as that. Anyway, here is where we continue chasing down the fake Terravox. And after defeating him, he is revealed to be Geocles, a former commander of the Dromus Legion and Terravox's rider. Because Terravox is a Dromus. The coolest looking Dromus I have ever seen. Look at Azdaha's son over here. I thought Dromuses were gentle, but I guess they also come like this. You know, maybe Anaxa's got a point. But anyway, it turns out that he had been on the Earth for this entire time, sulking about how he betrayed his army and followed Cyridra's orders. He also explains that Evernight cut a deal with him, reviving Geocles in exchange for him covering her tracks, which explains why she was able to move in such secrecy. She had 2 modes of hiding. However, not for much longer because Terravox was dying, and after one final act of betrayal to everything he knew, he gave his core flame to Danheng, hoping that he would uphold his duty. And this is how Danheng became Zhongli and aura farmed now that he is over 6 feet tall. But not for too long, because he still has a friend to find. So he plunged into Oblivion with a single goal in mind: finding the Trailblazer. And he found us. Miraculously. Danheng is just him this story. However, he did have some help. Castress was doing her best as well. MVP Danheng though. And here is where the Trailblazer's story intertwines with Danheng, and we head to the secret sanctum of Amphoreus together, where we learn that this place is where Cyrene goes to upload the memories of all the cycles. And this is a place that Irontomb doesn't even know it has. And through the millions of cycles, Cyrene and some unnamed and unknown individual has built an absolutely massive database filled with the information uploaded from all of the cycles, serving the sole purpose of keeping them from Irontomb by attracting the gaze of the Remembrance. And this place is called the Demiurge Matrix. the empty skull of Amphoreus that Lygus hollowed out himself, and then proceeded to forget about it. But through the creation of this massive database, Irontomb may have just created a new brain for themselves. But that's a video teaser for a future video. Back to the story. Because through inserting the As I Have Written book into the terminals and continuing on, we learned that Cyrene did in fact earn the gaze of the Remembrance. But it wasn't for the purpose of saving her world. It was because the Remembrance was planning to let the erudition die so that they could take over and devour the abandoned path, and fully was delighting in her creating an endless stream of memories for them. Meaning that Cyrene kinda got played, but kinda didn't at the same time. But that's not all we learned. We finally got confirmation on something that I've been screaming from the rooftops about, and I ended up being right once again, because Danheng confirmed himself that being gazed at by an Aeon does not make you an emanator. An emanator means that you were directly blessed by an Aeon. Danheng, thank you so much, because I have had so many comments of people ranting at me saying, Nova, you're wrong. Everyone in the Genie Society is an emanator, and I keep telling you no. It's only Dr. Primitive, Herta, and Zandar. Those are the only three, and we finally got our confirmation. But that final nail in the coffin bit of vindication aside, Fuli was enabling the destruction into killing the erudition so that they could take over and spread their reach to the far reaches of the cosmos. And because of this act of deception on an aeonic level, Evernight further reinforces her hatred for the Remembrance. And then she reveals something absolutely terrifying, because she knew that this wasn't the real Black Swan she was talking to. This was the reflection Black Swan projected here. So Evernight was going to implant herself into Black Swan so that she could track her down once she left and steal her body. Because she has a way of protecting us and Danheng from being erased, but once her erasure of Amphoreus' plan goes off, she dies too. So she was going to use Black Swan as a meat shield. Until we showed up. And here is where all three sides of this story converge. But of course, we can't beat her, so we're kinda stuck at an impasse. But here is where Cyrene finally returns from the memory that she was stuck in for a very long time. And in the meantime of all of these events, she was finding enough of March's memories to reassemble her in a limited capacity so that they could have a heart-to-heart with Evernight. And for the first time, Evernight was on the back foot, cast into a light cone fused with harmony power with Cyrene and March 7, where we learned that March had hid a small fraction of herself inside of Orynyx's veil, and that when the Trailblazer randomly snapped a picture of Orynyx, March was transferred via memories into the camera and was by that time traveling alongside us. March was with us the entire time, and she proceeded to oh so gently scold Evernight by proving that she had the meaning of the Trailblaze all wrong. The job of the Nameless is to walk beside the people of a world, not make decisions for them or choose their fate. And just using this opportunity to erase them after watching them fight for so long is just inhumane. And then she dropped my favorite line of this entire story. If Herta was like Evernight, she would have blown away Zandar and Irontomb a long time ago. And the only reason she didn't is because we are here and she likes us. But by Evernight's logic, Herta should just fire off the imaginary implosion pulse and be done with it instead of risking the fate of the universe for, what is it, 3 Nameless? And remember when I said that March was gentle? Yeah, Cyrene was less gentle because she straight up tells her that her plan would get everyone killed. Because turns out that Ceridra's law change didn't just change who had the authority of law. She never trusted anyone. And she made a law that if anyone tried to change or delete stuff from Era Nova, everyone gets deleted and merged into Irontomb. It's literally a final gambit of you better have been honest with me or you're all going down with me. which is just the most Cyrene thing ever. That makes perfect sense that she would do that. So all of Evernight's efforts would have been in vain if she succeeded. And though March did damage her resolve, it was this news that forced her to concede. And with that, she apologized and gave March back her body. And finally, after all this time, our three heroes are back together again to fight one last round with Irontomb. But we will not be fighting alone, because according to the news back on the Express, Skrullum is also getting his army of planet-sized mechs, and the Shinjo will be sending their aid as well. Probably because, remember, they want a cut of some of that golden blood because they got some plans for Yaosha cooked up. The hunt never ends, and you know how Lawn is. But most importantly, here at the very end, we get our confirmation that this Oblivion that Evernight has been talking about was in fact the ENIGMATA. She was both the Remembrance and the ENIGMATA this entire time. Your boy was right. Y'all have been clowning me for months, but I was right. Why? Because this is the truth and lies of Evernight explained. There is still so much to talk about. There is the fourth path that will end the universe that Kafka was talking about. There is still the very much present possibility that Polka Kakamon could show up, because now the news of Zandar's activities are now spread to the far reaches of the cosmos, because now the Shinjo knows about it, and they probably contacted the IPC too. And I didn't even mention the Demiurge situation, but because that's a whole nother thing. But in terms of the in-game paths theory, I don't think I need to explain why Evernight is Remembrance and why Danheng is Preservation when he keeps referring to himself as the guard of the Astral Express. So once again, Hoyo did my work for me. This story was possibly my favorite one yet. There were so many payoffs to so much foreshadowing, and I can't wait for this big battle and the defeat of the caveman. What do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.